as we just saw in that video. And that's really going to be a summary of what we will be talking about in the final chapters of the Tanya. We're up to chapter 52. I said last week that I was going to review chapter 51 and really just to give you a framework of where we are in the Tanya, where the last few chapters, but the last few chapters are very deep. But if I were to distill it into one or two lines, it's exactly what the Rebbe told Elliot Lasky in those few minutes on the steps of 770 in New York, which is ultimately, if you seek God, you will find him within you. You will find him in your heart. Meaning, he was asking, where is God? The Rebbe says, God's everywhere. Umitum, where is God? God's in a stone. God's in a tree. Everywhere. But where? If that's how you're asking, he's in your heart. Meaning, if you seek out God, you will find him. And what did the Rebbe tell him to do is start studying Torah and start doing mitzvahs. And that's what he did. He started, studying the code of Jewish law and started putting on tefillin, and it transformed him. So ultimately, the Tanya over here is going to get back to the theme of what the majority of Tanya was talking about. And let's just explain what I mean by that. The book of the Tanya we know is called the book of the Beinoni, the book of the intermediary, the book of the, or in the translation that we've been using, the book of the in-betweener. We're not talking about the tzaddik level. We're talking about the person who struggles and strives and overcomes his circumstances and controls himself and puts on the best behavior, even though inside he doesn't feel it all the time. So in chapters 35, 36, and 37, the theme of those chapters was about the primacy of action. Ultimately, our purpose here in this world, even if we may not achieve perfection like a tzaddik, but we can do perfect. And our job is to bring that perfection of God into this world. That's our job. That was the theme of those chapters. From then, we went into, I wouldn't say parentheticals, but we went into saying, but don't think intention and kavana and the mind is not important. From chapters 38, we went on to say that if you don't have the kavana, it's like a body without a soul. And we went on to go through different meditations to work on our insides, to work on our feelings, and to work on our mind. So from chapters 41 through chapters 50, which we just concluded, in those chapters, it was all about the importance of kavana, which is the meditations, the intentions that we put on. And we went through different meditations of fear, of awe of God, and different meditations of love of God, and reciprocal meditations. So we went through all of that. But now, as we conclude the chapters of Tanya, the 53 chapters, we're going to get back to the main agenda, the main theme, which is the book of the in-betweener, which is all about our action and our behavior. So the analogy we gave in chapter 35 was about the Yanuka. Want to just explain the Yanuka? Let me just answer Lynn's question, make sure before we go further. Go ahead, Lynn. Yes.
Well, I was just going to make a comment that the prophets say exactly what the Rebbe said, or the Rebbe said exactly what the prophet said, because it says in Jeremiah, this just happened, 29 and 30 and 31 are just really favorites of mine, but it says, when you call upon me and come and pray to me, I will listen to you. And when you seek me and find me, when you search for me with all your heart. And then it says, then I will be found by you. And it says what he'll do for the people that do that. So he's just spoke words of the prophet.
Beautiful. Yeah, that is beautiful verses from Michael. Amazing. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you very much, Lynn. So over here, we're going to go back to the Yanuka. Yanuka literally means a child. And this was a prodigy during the times of the Talmud that, I'll have to look up the details of the story, but the analogy you're going to be familiar with because we had it already in chapters 35. But the Yanuka was this child prodigy that was a genius and that just was emanating godliness everywhere he went, and he impressed the giants of the Talmud, of the sages of the time, and he started giving this teaching. Sorry, that we have a wick, we have oil, and then we have a flame. The wick is the body of a person. The oil is the fuel, which is the mitzvot that we do. And when we have our body performing the mitzvot, which is the fuel, what do we get? We get a flame. The flame is God's Shekinah, the divine presence that rests here in our world. So from chapters 51, we go back to this analogy from chapters 35. So like I said, from chapter 38 through chapter 50, we segued to talk about the importance of kavana, but now we're going to be going back to talking about the primacy of action and behavior, which is the main thing for the Beinani, and which is the main theme of our Tanya. And therefore, we're going back to analyze this analogy that the flame is the trina that rests above our head, and we get this trina by doing the mitzvot with our body, which means here in this world we act with mitzvot, and we're going to see also Torah study. And when we do that, we have the Shekhinah, which is the flame that flickers above us. So the question we pose in chapter 51 is, and really the point of the question is to get into a broader idea of God's Shekhinah, God's divine presence in our world. But the question we asked is, what does it mean that God's Shekhinah is in the Holy of Holies if godliness is everywhere? Like the prophets say, Melo kal aretz kavodo, godliness, Hashem, God fills the entire world. You would understand that God is everywhere, which we know that. That's what the Rebbe told Elliot Lasky. God is everywhere. No, Shir, I'm not sick. I just need a little bit of water, but I just have to clear my throat. But thank you. So, what does it mean that Shekhinah is in the Holy of Holies? Is if it's everywhere? So, to answer this, we speak about it as a metaphor from our body, from our own experience. This is a quote from the prophets where it says, "Mipsari, from my flesh, because the Eloka, I can see, I can perceive, I can understand, and I could grasp godliness." So we could learn a metaphor from our own life, from our own existence. We don't say that one part of our body has more life than another. When you are alive, all of you is alive. You don't say there's more life. I feel more alive in my hand than I do in my foot. Every part of your body is alive. You don't say one part of my body is more alive than another. It doesn't make sense. Every limb is equally alive. They're alive because you have a soul that's giving you life. It's just that every limb has a different dose of vitality. There's a soul going into it. Your eye has in your eye, you have the power of vision. In your ear, you have the power to hear. In your feet, you have the power to walk. And in your hand, you have the power of movement. But so it's not, there's a different aspect of vitality going to every limb, but all of your body is enlivened equally. So you have a soul giving life to your body, but now the soul goes into every part of our body and every limb to a different degree. The headquarter for all of it, no pun intended, is going to be in the head, which means you have the headquarters, which is from the brain, it brings and it distributes the right amount of energy to every body part. So the head knows what's going on in the toe, but the toe has no idea what's going on in the head because the headquarters is going to be in the brain controls all of it. So in a similar way of understanding that analogy of our body and the headquarters of our body, which is going to be in the brain, God is equally present everywhere, just like we have life throughout our entire body. But there needs to be a contact point, a headquarters, for it to distribute godliness everywhere. And that's going to be the Holy of Holies. So to speak, the Holy of Holies is the headquarters of the world. From there, it distributes God's Shekhinah to the world. similar to how in our body there's life everywhere, just like godliness fills the entire world. But it starts, I wouldn't say it starts, but it's controlled by the brain, and from there it distributes it to the body. And that's actually why, I mean, going back to chapter 12 of Tanya, which one of the main lessons we learned to Tanya was the idea that the moach shalit al alev, that the brain or the mind controls the heart, and controls the rest of our body. It's because the soul emanates from the brain, and from the brain it goes to the body. So the brain has a level of superiority that it's the start of the emanation of for the energy for the body, and that's why if you have the brain that rules over the heart, you could control yourself because that's the distribution center for all of it. That's the headquarters for all of it. That's chapter 51 in a nutshell. And yes, Marcia, you're muted, so just unmute yourself first.
Okay. So when I was in Israel recently, I was thinking about how, we went to the tunnel and people were very, we were excited in a way about being near the Holy of Holies when we were in the temple, but there's
For
no
sure.
temple now, and there's no Holy of Holies. So how does that make God's presence in the Holy of Holies? How do we reconcile that?
Good. So it's good to have a cliffhanger because that's going to be chapter 53. Chapter 53 is going to go about what happened when the temple was destroyed. I don't know if I should give you the spoiler now. I want to make sure you come back for that chapter. But that's going to be chapter 53, which is the final chapter of the Tanya, and it really brings it all together. So that's a very important question that we're going to get back to and see that. So we know that my simple answer is going to be that holiness never leaves its place. So that's why we still go visit the Western Wall and we still go to the tunnels and we still have the holiness on the Temple Mount. And that's why we don't go on the Temple Mount, is because of the holiness that never leaves. And that's why even our tefillin, when we don't use them anymore because they're worn out, or our prayer book, we don't throw them out because there's holiness that remains there no matter what. There's always holiness that remains there. So we're gonna get back to that, and that's a very important question. But now
Are we
we're gonna
meeting next week?
actually no. Thank you for reminding me. Next week we are not because it's Erev Pesach. We actually burn our chametz at this time next week. The Seder is in exactly a week from tonight, so we won't be meeting next week or the week following, which is going to be Pesach. So our next meeting, our next learning is going to be April 19th, right? April 5th is the Seder. April 12th is the seventh day of Pesach, and then which is the holiday, and then April 19th we're going to meet. Thank you for bringing that. And actually, May 1st, I'm just going to pause with a commercial. May 1st, we're starting a 6-week JLI course called Warrior to Warrior. And it's actually all based on the Tanya with the JLI curriculum. So it's one of the most fundamental chapters of the Tanya was chapters 26 through 32, talking about the troubleshooting of our soul, what to do when we feel inadequate, or we feel shame, or we feel guilt, or we feel remorse, or we feel apathetic, and it goes through incredible emotions. We learned it together, but the JLI puts it through an incredible curriculum through modern day psychology and emotions, understanding it. Also, we're starting that course. I just sent out an email about it yesterday, and we're going to be starting that, God willing, May 1st. It's a 6-week series, and I would love for you to join that, especially with the foundation you have from the Tanya. A lot of these themes will just circle together and come together nicely. So I definitely recommend that. Okay, so chapter 52, I won't lie to you, it's quite deep, it's Kabbalistic, it's a great send-off to the entire Tanya, where we get into really Kabbalistic ideas. But I want to distill it to the main points before we study chapter 52 inside. What we're dealing is okay, so we said that already. Let me just see where I'm in my notes. Okay, so what we have is we have three parts. Let's say, going back to the analogy of the body and soul, what we're going to have is there's three parts to the soul and the connection to the body. We have one part of the soul that is the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul is beyond any limitations of the body. It's everywhere and it's nowhere, because you can't describe what the soul is, and you can't bring the soul into the body. That's the essence of the body that is beyond. Then you have the soul as it is as a potential um, to its distribution to the body. So it's not yet distributed, but the soul has the potential for the eye to be able to see, and for the brain to be able to think, and for the ears to be able to hear, and for the feet to be able to walk. The soul has that potential. Now it's the way it's the potential is in the brain. So you have the soul in its essence, which is not limited to any body parts or not even potential yet. But um, then you have the way the soul is in the brain, which gives it the potential for it to animate and bring life to the body and its different parts. And then you actually have when it's being distributed to the various body parts. It's the filtering down to those three to the body parts. Those are three phases how the soul is coming into the body and giving life to the body. One is the essence of the soul, which is beyond. Then you have the potential of the soul, which is in the brain, and then you have the actual distribution of it, the way the soul is found in the different body parts and giving the animation and the life vitality to each part the way it's appropriate. So you don't have the power to hear in the eyes. You have the power to hear in the ear, and every it's distilled for every area according to what is appropriate. So the same is also going to be in the reflection of this in the godliness animating into the world. You have the essence of God, which is beyond being invested in the world. That is the part of godliness that is most hidden. It's God in his essence, and we can't touch it, we can't describe it. In the words of the Kabbalah that we're going to be learning soon, is stimu d'chol stimin. It's concealed beyond any concealment, above all concealments. It's the most hidden. It's God's essence. We can't talk to it, we can't relate to it, we can't describe it, we can't understand it. Then it gets to the headquarters, which is going to be the Holy of Holies. And from there, it gets distributed, and that's going to be called the Shekhinah. And from there, it gets distributed to to the rest of the world. So if we were to say that there's a headquarter, a one place where, and from there it's able to interact with the rest of the world, that's going to be in our body, the brain, or in the world, it's going to be the Holy of Holies. And that's what we refer to as when we say Shekhinah. Shekhinah, literally, does anyone know what shachen means? Lynn, could you help me with the English over here?
Yes, it means like a neighbor or
Very good.
neighborhood or
When
something that's close.
awesome. When we walked around Jerusalem on Shabbat, there's different shchunot, there's different neighborhoods that you could go to. And there's even a place in Jerusalem called Shchunat Chabad, the Chabad neighborhood. And there's obviously, many other neighborhoods. A neighbor, like Lynn just said, is called a shachen. So the idea of Shekhinah is how God's holiness, God's energy, God's divine light is residing or is uh, coming into this world. Like a neighbor that lives right next to you, you have Shekhinah, which is God's divine presence
Good
in this world.
morning.
So we have let me just see. So there we go. So what we have is we have God's essence, which is not the way it's being able to be filtered down yet, not in the potential of it. It's God's essence. Then you have God's light, the way it's totally filtered down. And then you have the middle part, which is the middle of these three phases, which is going to be the Shekhinah of God, which is from like in the brain going to the rest of the body, going into the rest of the world. And that's in the temple. So from the temple, it's going to the rest of the world, which allows for the building blocks of the world. Our job, and I just want to, before we read it inside, I just want to make sure I get this part in. When we were in Israel, maybe it's because I feel like I'm getting old, but a lot of times when I go to weddings, I feel like the music is too loud. I can't talk to the person sitting next to me because the music is just too loud. I definitely felt like the last night when we had our a dinner before going to the airport in Modi'in, which was like, probably a 20-minute ride to the airport. I was trying to talk to the people next to me. How was their day? And I felt like it was so loud. And many times I go to weddings, not many times, but whenever I do go to weddings in New York, They put the music so loud that I can't even enjoy it. Um, so, but then there's also different um, um, uh, uh, what would we call them? Frequencies of noise that is going on around us that we can't tap into. Meaning it's not on our wavelength. I don't know what the right term would be, but we can't tune into hearing those things. We don't have the right frequency to be able to hear the noise going on around us. But then you can have noise around us that we could hear is just too loud. So for the frequency that we can't tune into, it's beyond our ability to listen to. But then we could be listening to music that is just too loud. And all we have to do is either turn down the music or wear the right gear to be able to appreciate it. So God's essence is going to be like that frequency that is beyond our ability to be able to tap into. Like that frequency that is in the air that is just on a different level or a different wavelength, we can't tap into. Maybe it's sad they can, but we can't. But then you have the Shekhinah of God, which is within our wavelength. It may just be too high or too loud for us. And what we need to do is not necessarily turn down the music because we want God's Shekhinah to be in its full strong state. But what we have to do is just equip ourselves properly to wear the right gear to be able to appreciate that sound, to be able to appreciate that energy. So just like, nowadays it's so easy to come up with these examples, just like you can't go to space, you're just wearing glasses. If you're going to go to space, you have to wear the right gear. You have to wear the right helmet with the right mask and the right gear. And if you're a scuba diver, you have to wear the right gear, but then you could fully enjoy scuba diving as long as you're wearing the right equipment, the right a suit and the right helmet, whatever. So it's not that you can't appreciate it. You could. You just to appreciate it, you have to be wearing the right gear. So the same is also going to be with the frequency. If we want to appreciate the Shekhinah of God that is coming into the world, headquartered in the Holy of Holies, but from when the temple was destroyed, it's not there anymore, or it's there, but it's not the frequency that we want. We want to be able to wear the right gear. What we need to do is prepare ourselves or equip ourselves to be able to tap into that Shekhinah. So to tune into it, we need to wear the right gear. So ultimately, when Mashiach comes, we will have the right gear. That's going to be, and going back to Marsha, your point, when Mashiach comes, we're going to be properly equipped. But nowadays, in order to equip ourselves, what we need to do is like what the Rebbe told Elliot Lasky, is through mitzvot observance and through Torah study, that becomes the headquarters of the Shekhinah, and that allows us to be properly equipped. There's going to be already chapter 53 a little bit. That's a little bit of the spoiler. So when the temple stood, when the first temple stood, the Shekhinah was there in the Holy of Holies. And we even say, and this is something just fascinating, and I've definitely shared this before. The Holy of Holies, which many of us were just, literally a stone's throw away from it. The Holy of Holies took up space in the temple. It was a room that was a square. It was a 20 cubit, 20 amma, which is 20 cubits on width and length. And it says that the ark was right in the center. The Holy of Holies had the ark. In the ark was the two sets of tablets, the broken ones that Moshe came down the mountain with and broke, and the second set of tablets that he gave to the Jewish people, and then the Torah that Moshe himself wrote before he passed away. That was in the ark. The ark took up 2.5 cubits. It was 2.5 cubits long by 1.5 cubits wide, and it was in the center of the room. And yet, it tells us that from the edge of the ark to one wall was 10 cubits, and from the other edge of the ark to the other wall was another 10 cubits. So that would be symmetrically impossible if it's a 20 cubit room and it takes up 2.5 cubits, and from each side of the ark to the wall was 10 cubits. Doesn't add up. That makes no sense. But yet that's how it was. It was a miraculous idea where it took up space. It was 2.5 cubits on the floor, and yet it didn't take up space. So the Holy of Holies had that manifestation of divine energy in a very, very strong way. And that was the place for it. For us to be able to condition ourselves, to be able to appreciate such energy, just like an astronaut needs to condition himself and everyone else needs to, our conditioning as a Jew is to be able to do Torah mitzvot, which is a fascinating idea. Even like what Elliot Lasky was told by the Rebbe, every person, if they could be a black person or an Indian person, it's incredible. They have their role that they have to play. They don't have to keep kosher. That's not the conditioning that they need to be able to have their relationship with God. They have a relationship with God, but the conditioning they need is different than the conditioning that we need. They don't have to do the 613 mitzvot to be able to appreciate the frequency to be on that level of the Shekhinah. They have their own frequency that they need to be on. But for a Jew to be able to condition himself, it's through the 613 mitzvot and through the study of Torah. And that's how we condition ourselves. So chapter 52, when we learn it inside, it's going to be a lot more Kabbalistic. And, I'll get back to some of these points as we go through it and make sure we don't get lost in it. But that's going to be one of the main themes.
So, Rabbi, when we're
Yeah.
talking about studying Torah, does that include the whole Tanakh or just the Torah Moshe? Could you please share that,
Yeah,
please?
so it is. Thank you, Lynn. It includes everything in the Torah. So not only the written law, which is the Tanakh, the 24 books, but it also includes all the oral law, which means right now we are studying Torah. Whether you're studying Jewish law, whether you're studying Jewish mysticism, whether you're studying Jewish stories. In another section of the Tanya, it talks about, the Talmud has a bunch of stories. You would think that those stories are just cute, but really distilled in those stories is the essence of God. So in every part of the Torah, you have God's essence. And we need to tap into it. And different layers of the Torah have different areas or points of connection. Actually, on Sunday we went to one of the most beautiful mountains. I'm not a professional hiker, but we love going on hikes. So it's just on Sunday we went to Ring Mountain, which is in South Marin, and it's just gorgeous. And over the past few Sundays, well, not the past few because we were away for two of them, but over the past few months, we went to different areas of Ring Mountain and like you have different entrances, different parts of the mountain you could enter, and each one is just beautiful. And every time we drive to another one, I'm like, it can't be more beautiful than the last one, but it is. Each one has their own surrounding and beauty and views that is just gorgeous. So the same is also with every part of Torah. It's a different point of entry, but you're connecting with the same energy of Hashem, with the same energy of God, which is just stunning. Okay, so yeah, I'll take a question and then we'll learn a little bit inside. We're at 657. It's a rather long chapter. It's like 10 of these pages. But yeah, let's do it. Go ahead, Shira.
Does
Or
this
Tom.
does this include all 24 books or just Torah itself?
A good question. So I think that's what Lynn was just asking. So it includes not only the 5 books and not only the 24 books, it includes all parts of the Torah. So the 24 books are the written part of the Torah, but we're including over here also the oral part of the Torah, which is Jewish law, Jewish mysticism, Jewish stories, and every other aspect of Torah. It would be included in the study of Torah that we're referring to here. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi and Lynn. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So 657, that will bring us. Oh, sorry. Yes, Michelle, you had a question?
No, it's
Oh,
probably not that important. Just that because you were talking about hiking, the absolute best in the world is up here in the Sierras in a place called Desolation Wilderness. So when you
Okay.
guys are ready, just because I've hiked all over Marin too, but
All right. Very important. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Okay, just when you.
Awesome. So we're going to be on 657. The title of the chapter is the same as the last chapter, which is What is the Shekhinah? But this is part 2, where we already spoke about it a little bit in part 1, which was in chapter 51. We spoke about the flame, which uses the fuel, which is the oil, and but the wick, which is the body, to produce that Shekhinah, which is that flame. And okay, so now chapter 52, section 1 is the definition of Shekhinah. Chapter 50, oh, I'm sorry, let me pull it up on the screen. Forget about that. Section 1, a definition. Does everyone see the full screen? Or do you see like a sidebar with other things? Okay, hope you could
Full screen.
Full
full screen.
screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, great. Uh, yeah, I can't see you guys anymore. One second, everyone. Make sure you can still hear me.
Yes.
Okay. There we go. Okay, and you can still see. Okay, perfect. Chapter 51 compared the soul's presence in the human body to God's presence in the world. We learned that number one, the soul's non-composite core. I've been using the word essence. Over here, where the Tanya in English is going to be using the term non-composite core, which is devoid of any specific powers, transcends any direct interaction with the body. Number two, in the brain, many specific powers emerge from the soul's latent potential that will later enter all the limbs and organs to energize them. And number three, after the brain takes whatever power it needs, the remaining powers then spread from the brain to the rest of the body. So I hope that was clear in explaining it here. I spent some time explaining it in my introduction, but those are the three levels. One is the essence or the non-composite core. Number one is the way it is in the brain, which is the potential for it to be distributed to the rest of the body. And then you have the way it's actually being distributed to the limbs and organs. In chapter 51, we compared phases 1 and 3 of this process to God's manifestation in the world. Initially, we learned God is hidden from all the hidden, totally transcending the universe, just as the soul's non-composite essence transcends the body, stage 1. We then discussed the heavenly equivalent of stage 3, how God's light is diminished and filtered to be compatible with each of the worlds, just as the soul's specific powers are delivered to individual limbs and organs. What we didn't discuss is in chapter 51 was the heavenly equivalent of phase 2, how soul powers initially emerge in the brain before interacting with the body. What is the equivalent to phase 2 in the scheme of divine emergence? So just to summarize this, phase 2 is how in our soul, in our body, we have the soul coming into the brain before going into the rest of the rest of the limbs of the body. So it's the potential for it to be able to come in. Now, what we're going to try to describe is what does that mean in the bigger picture, which is in the Shekhinah, God's divine energy coming into the world. Where is its headquarters? So let's see that inside. The Tanya will turn to that question now. And just as with a person's soul, the primary emergence of its total energy before that energy actually enters any limbs or organs is in the brain, and all the bodily parts receive a mere flow of light and power from that total energy, which shines to them from the source of manifest total soul energy in the brain. The same is true precisely, figuratively speaking, with God, namely the primary manifestation of the total energy that flows to the worlds and their inhabitants, which means where is the main place where the energy will flow to the rest of the world, is found before it reaches them, absorbed and expressed within God's will and His Chachma, Bina and Das, which are called in the Kabbalah the divine brain. So I love this term of a divine brain, where we're going to be referring to godliness in terms of the Sefirot. We know we have 10 Sefirot. The highest of the 10 Sefirot are the three intellectual, which are Chachma, Bina, and Das. And, maybe I'll just pause for just 1 second here and just make sure we're clear. This is going all the way back to chapter 3, which I think we learned in either in late 2018 or in early 2019. So just to make sure we're clear on what it is, we know that we have 10 soul powers. We have the essence of the soul, but then the way the soul interacts in our body, it comes through 10 soul powers. The 10 soul powers we know is the Chachma, the inquiry, the cognition, which is the Bina, the recognition, which is, and the application, which is the Das. And from there it goes to Chesed and Gevura and Tiferes, which are the 7 emotional attributes, which are called the children that develop from the 3 parental ones, which are the cognitive ones, and those are the emotions that develop from our mind. So from the Chachma, Bina, and Das, we have the feeling of love, the feeling of fear, discipline, justice, and compassion, and harmony. All those, endurance and victory, humility and communication, and finally Malchus, which is going to be the lowest of the 10, which literally would mean Malchus would mean royalty and kingdom, but it's the ability to speak and relate to another, which is the lowest of the 10. Those are our 10 soul powers. But those 10 soul powers are mirroring the godly 10 Sefirot, which means the way God made us is the way God interfaces with the world. So we are a reflection, we are a buildup, we are built with the 10 soul powers, which is how similarly God used to create the world. So those are called the 10 Sefirot. The 10 Sefirot are the 10 divine energies in creating. Mirroring that, we have the 10 soul powers, which are within us, our ability to think, whether it's our ability to inquire and think beyond us, or our ability to analyze and have cognition, et cetera, et cetera. So over here, what we're going to be talking about is the the brain. There's a divine brain of God, just like we're talking about our soul is headquartered in our brain. What about the essence of God? Where does God, where's the potential of God's energy coming into the world through to build the world? The building blocks for the world is starting with the 10 Sefirot. In the brain of the 10 Sefirot, which are the 3 cognitive ones. So the divine Chachma, Bina, and Das, again, it's the acronym of Chabad, but over here we're not talking about Chabad, Chachma, Bina, and Das, the way it is in our soul powers. We're talking about Chachma, Bina, and Das, the way it is the divine energy of God. That's the top 3 of the 10 Sefirot. Hope that's clear. So we're saying that the divine brain is where God's potential to come into the world starts. That's God's headquarters to come into the world. Let's just read that paragraph again and see if it's a little clearer now. I'm just going to read this middle paragraph again. Okay, I hope you don't mind. I'm just taking my time over here. Just want it's a pretty Kabbalistic chapter. So at least for this section, let's try to go a little slow. And just as with a person's soul, the primary emergence of its total energy, before that energy actually enters any limbs or organs, is in the brain, right? It starts in the brain, and all the bodily parts receive a mere flow of light and power from the total energy, which shines to them from the source of manifest total soul energy in the brain. The same is true precisely, figuratively speaking, with God. So this is just an important few lines, namely the primary manifestation of the total energy that flows to the worlds and their inhabitants. Where's the headquarters for all of it? Is found before it reaches them, absorbed and expressed within God's will and His chachma, bina and das. So again, God's will and His chachma, bina and das, which are called in the Kabbalah the divine brain. As we learned in chapter 51, the soul's essential core transcends the body and has no specific location in it. It is the manifest powers of the soul merging from the soul's essential core that directly energizes the body. And these powers begin their emergence in the brain area before they enter the body itself. Since man is created in the image of God, the above precisely reflects the spiritual unfolding through which God energizes the world. The essence of God's blessed infinite light transcends everything. It's only His powers that emerge from the infinite light, which energize the universe. The initial emergence of these powers occurs in God's mental energies of will, Chachma, Bina, and Das. So figuratively speaking, God's powers also emerge first in His brain, as is the case with human beings. And these divine brain energies take expression in the Torah, God's Chachma, Bina, and Das, and its mitzvot, which is God's will. So if you want to where is the energy of God's divine brain? Where do you find that? You find that in Torah. Where is divine will? You find that in mitzvot. As the Zohar teaches, the Blessed Holy One looked into the Torah and created the world. In Hebrew or in Aramaic, the term is istakel be'er isa uvara alma, which means the divine light and energy which initially emerged as the Torah's heavenly root, God's wisdom and will, is what powers the universe. So just like the brain is the power for the rest of the body, because that's where the brain is, sorry, that's where the soul is. So where is the power for the whole universe? That's going to be in the headquarters, which is going to be God's divine will and wisdom. And I just want to stop here for a moment. Over and over again in my intro, I was telling you that where's the headquarters? It's the Holy of Holies. Because that's going to be the God's divine will and wisdom, the way it's going to come from one world to the next world, to the next world. Where is that divine will and wisdom found in our world? That's going to be in the Holy of Holies. But it starts with the Chachma in Atzilus, and then it goes to the Chachma of Bria, and then it goes to the Chachma Bin Andas of Yitzira, until it comes into our world, which is the lowest of the four worlds, which is Asiya, and that's the way it is in the Holy of Holies. And that's why, what was the only item in the Holy of Holies? It was God's Torah and tablets, which is all about God's divine will and wisdom. So that was the epicenter of divine will and wisdom for the world. But before it got into the Holy of Holies, it was in a higher world. And the higher world was Atzilus. And then from there to Bria. So, and then from there to the Chachma and Bina and Das of Yitzira until it got into our world. And over here, we have a place where we could locate it, which is going to be the Holy of Holies, the divine will and wisdom, or the Chachma, Bina and Das of God in this world. Yes, Lynn.
Okay, so since there currently is no Kodesh Kodeshim on earth, how does that work? Or is that a heavenly Kodesh Kodeshim? How are we seeing this?
So
currently?
chapter 53. That's the
Oh,
cliffhanger.
okay.
That's
you.
chapter 53, where he goes through where it was in the first temple, and then after the first temple was destroyed, and the second temple was different because the Holy of Holies didn't didn't house the ark. The ark, I don't know if you're familiar with
Right,
this, it
right.
didn't
The ark
return in
was
the
not there.
second temple. Right, the ark
Right.
wasn't there. So it was a little bit different. And then obviously after the temple was destroyed, it was going to be different. So chapter 53, it goes through the stages of where that epicenter is. Good question.
Okay, thank
And
you.
Marcia, Naomi was asking that question as well. Yes, Michelle.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So when
Oh,
you
no
showed
problem.
the no, when you showed the video earlier, I
Yeah.
didn't catch, you said something about, he asked what about the God for non-Jewish people and for Black people. I didn't quite catch what you had said about that, but then also the Holy of Holies is holy for everybody, right? Not just
Yeah,
Jewish.
and just to correct, I don't think it was that the God was different for Indian people and Black people than for Jewish people. I think it was the relationship was different, but the God is the same, right? We all have the same God. Yeah, but continue. Sorry, Michelle. Yeah, I just had to make that little point. But then continuing to the Holy of Holies, is that your question?
Okay, so our relationship is different. I've heard because we have a different soul, but anyhow, but the point is the relationship is different. So is the Holy of Holies, is it Holy of Holies just for us, or is it Holy of Holy for non-Jewish people as well?
Do you not see the politics going on in Israel? Everyone's fighting over it.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess so, yeah.
It's for sure. It's holy for everyone. And actually, not even everyone, not even the Jews. We weren't able to go in there, right? We weren't conditioned to be able to access it. Only the Kohen Gadol, and not even every day. Only on Yom Kippur, he was conditioned enough to go in there. Most of us can't. And I think I described this in our trip to Israel. Trying to remember who was with us on that day. I don't remember, but um, there were signs outside of the temple telling people um, till here you can go or till there you can go because people came from all over to see the glory of, first of all, the beautiful temple was just a magnificent building, and people came from all over just as tourists. But then they also want the magnificence of what was going on with the holiness. They also came to see. So there were signs actually in Greek outside of the temple saying that you could go until here, like meaning enter beyond this point, enter at your own risk, because people who weren't conditioned for that next level weren't able to go there. So there was a place for where the non-Jews were able to go to, but then even the Jews, the Israelites, were only able to go to a certain place, and then even the Kohanim were only able to go to a certain place because they weren't conditioned to go beyond that point. So it's more the conditioning is different for each person. We'll have time to finish to the section. Let me just jump ahead a second. Yeah, we're not going to finish. Let's just finish this idea. And these divine brain energies take expression in the Torah, God's Chachma, Bin, and Das, and its mitzvot, God's will. As the Zohar teaches, the blessed, we said that, divine light, and okay, so actually that's a good stopping point right there. Disclosure of the energy flow. Okay, we'll stop over here, I guess. And it's going to be a while till we continue. So I hope this gives you enough thought or enough nourishment to last us until our next study. And I do highly suggest joining our Tanya JLI class, which is always done on a top-notch level. We're going to be starting that May 1st, which is it should really be beautiful because God willing, during May or June, we're actually going to conclude all 53 chapters of Tanya. So obviously you can walk away with a bunch of tidbits and information, but I'm really hoping that the JLI course I specifically chose it to do as we conclude our study of Tanya, it will coincide with finishing Tanya. So it'll also give us a beautiful takeaway points from earlier, from the middle chapters of the Tanya, which was chapters 26 to 32, which were very, very, very practical. And now it's going to be on a Monday evening, 7:30, starting May 1st through June 5th. All right, everyone. If I don't see you before Passover, have a great Pesach. And yeah, God willing, we'll see you in the middle of April.
Thank you.
Pesach
Thank you.
Sameach.
Pesach
This-
Sameach, Pesach Sameach.
Yeah, Samantha, this
Uh,
class was so meaningful to me. The way you summed up the three phases was just really excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the Tanya. I took it from the intro of the Tanya, but thank you. And then just one question that came in: can you name the times when your skin left? For instance, when Aaron died, when the temple was destroyed. Yeah, the main one is going to be when the temples were destroyed, and also after the sin of the golden calf was a big one. But we'll go through that in chapter 53. Actually, we're going to go through that at length. All right, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Yeah.